Three, two, one. Aloha Hawaii. Welcome to our radio show. We air every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. on 94.3 FM and 690 AM, The Answer. I'm your host, Elijah Perrick, with my guest, President Vit from Liberland, a brand new country in Europe. You might be thinking to yourself, what is Liberland? Well, stay tuned for the next 54 minutes, and we're going to share with you all about that. My guest is President Vit. Sir, please introduce yourself.
Well, it's great to be with you, first of all, Elijah. And yes, I'm running a small country between Croatia and Serbia. And we are planning to implement the latest technologies and the best ideas how to run a country. And we are very far out already. We are, I think, 90% finished with our mission. And we are now in this process of seeking international recognition and getting more support globally for the creation of the country.
That's amazing. I'm curious, have you seen that movie? I think it's called The Princess Diary, where there's a girl in San Francisco and she finds out that her dad was a king and that she's supposed to be the princess. So she goes from San Francisco to a country in Europe and becomes the new queen.
Well, I think I missed that one. You know, there are a bunch of other really good movies like the Princess Grace from Monaco and the Rose Island, which I would also very deeply recommend you. But I guess I need to do the one that you just recommended.
The movie you recommended sounds good. So basically that storyline reveals a country that many people haven't heard of in America. And when I first met you this past Thursday evening, I think it was Wednesday evening, you introduced a country that I've never heard of. So I'm very fortunate and grateful to have a conversation with you. Tell us, those two countries that Liberland is near, where are those countries near? Because everybody in Hawaii may have not heard of those countries as well.
Yeah, well, Serbia and Croatia are major Balkan countries. There is, say, 12 million people living in them in total, and there is, of course, long history of the whole region, right? The Yugoslavia was a country that was connecting all of these countries. Then there was this Balkanization, which means the whole region is basically split into multiple countries. And Croatia is the most famous sailing country in the world with beautiful natural resources. And Serbia is, well known for variety of things. But I think one of the most important historical elements was the fact that it was bombed by NATO very recently. So there was this, I would say, a little bit of problematic history, international history, but it's also a great place of cultural significance. It was the seat of the Yugoslavia back in the days. And we're right between those two countries and very close to Hungary. Hungarian borders, only 15 kilometers away. So for us, relations with Hungary are also very important.
That's wonderful. You mentioned Hungary. The church I used to pastor at, we had a pastor there. She was from Hungary. Well, that's great. So tell us, what are the values of Liberland?
At the very beginning, we declared we want to start a country where people would not be bothered with unnecessary taxation and regulation, and that we really want to find the freest country in the world, where people can prosper without too much obstruction from their governments. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to create a country with voluntary tax system. We are trying to create as little regulation as possible, but yet create a good rule of law, a place where you are sure what belongs to who, and the courts will be working very quickly. And all of that is done on blockchain. So we're utilizing the same technology like Bitcoin, but the ultimate use of this technology, I think, is the running of governments. And I think we're like 5 years ahead of anybody else in this regard. So we are having this great advantage that we're introducing something completely new. So completely new ideas of how the state should be running. A lot of these ideas are coming from the American Revolution, but many of them are also coming from Switzerland, and many of them are coming from these decentralized autonomous organizations that are also running on blockchain. And then the completely new technology on which you can run a country in a way that every single citizen can actually have all the state bureaucracy on their computer. And that way the whole system is decentralized and very transparent.
That's amazing. You mentioned that your country has an economic system built on blockchain or Bitcoin. I've got about $1,000 in Bitcoin or in one of those cryptocurrencies. So I'm not fully into it yet. I'm more of just testing the waters, but it sounds like you guys are pretty trusting of it all.
Yeah, well, we have implemented Bitcoin as our main reserve currency back in 2015 when Bitcoin was $250. I think that was a quite good decision to make, and we are big believers in decentralization, on removing the central banking from the equation of the world economy. I think that's one of the important elements. But we're going even further in the sense that Liberland is forbidden to intrude into economy of the country. So the state is not regulating business, which is, I think, very, very important. Unless you're making, I don't know, nuclear weapons or biological weapons, the state will not interfere in whatever you're doing. We have a very smart system of licenses, but no license is actually needed for 99% of activities in Liberland. The license is basically just a paper which certifies how much taxes you have paid in total. And those taxes are not even real taxes, because whenever you pay taxes in Liberland, you become the shareholder of the country that you're living in, which I think is also a new and innovative way how to change the relationship between the state and the individual into something more reasonable.
Wow. It sounds like you've thought out so many aspects of your country already, even though it's so young. So, President Vit, what do you want to say to the people of Hawaii? Like, is there some message that you're wanting to get across to us?
I'm definitely coming over in near future, and it's amazing how many connections we already have with Hawaii. And our new assistant, she just came back from Hawaii, and she will be probably nominated to organize that trip. We just met quite a lot of people, including yourself. So our visit to Hawaii is long overdue, and of course it's a lovely place to visit. Well, we have a nice summers in Liberland, long sandy beaches, but during the winter, I think Hawaii is the best place for us to go to if we don't want to freeze. So from that perspective, I'm very much looking forward to visit Hawaii and learn from the people and their culture, and maybe try to inspire people to think differently about some elements of statehood as well.
I agree. Thinking differently about elements of statehood is definitely something that my office is advocating for, the Republican caucus is advocating for. For those of us just now tuning into the radio, you're listening to Hawaii State Representative Elijah Perrick, along with President Vit of Liberland. And how do I say your last name?
Jedlicka, but don't try. Just please call me.
Thank you for your grace. So we met this past Wednesday in Washington, D.C., and we were part of an American Legislative Exchange Council where we had government officials at the national level, state level, local level, represented and advocating for federalism, free market systems, things like that. So how did you get connected with ALEC?
ALEC invited me 6 years ago to speak at their Denver conference, and that was I think, big success. They enjoyed my keynote speech, and we're very well connected now with some of the key people in the leadership of ALEC. I was very proud to actually give out one of the highest state awards to the leadership of the organization yesterday. And there is this great connection between Liberland and ALEC. I think the main persona representing the values of ALEC is Thomas Jefferson, and Liberland itself was purposefully born on the birthday of Thomas Jefferson. So there is this deeper connection and deeper, or like one person that really binds the way we see the world, and that makes us natural allies, even though Liberland is a startup country in Europe and ALEC is this great organization putting together like-minded legislators across the United States.
Amazing. That's great that you guys hold to those conservative values. So I think there's about 180 nations participating in the United Nations. Please don't quote me on this. I think there's about 230 nations worldwide. And this is at least information that I remember from high school, so I haven't recently checked that. Is Liberland hoping to participate in the United Nations?
I think observatory membership in the longer run wouldn't be harmful. Yeah, I remember always when I first time met the Prince of Liechtenstein, who told me that he's very excited that Liberland will be sitting next to Liechtenstein because we are in alphabetical order. So whenever you ask me about UN, I always get that story in my head. Prince Hans Adam, by the way, very exciting person to chat with amazing book, the State for New Millennia or for third millennia. It is a book that also is part of the inspiration for what we are doing in Liberland.
Which book is that?
The state in the, if I'm correct,
Stayed in the third millennium.
third in millennia, yes, state in the third millennia, which was written by Prince Hans Adam of Liechtenstein, who when we first time met, he said excitingly that he's looking forward to sit in UN together because we are both at the same alphabetical order, Liechtenstein, Liberland. But I was very recently at the UN as well. I was awarded some nice humanitarian award for our help in Caribbean countries. Liberland Aid Foundation is quite active in this region, and somebody at the UN noticed. So there was another great opportunity to present some of the things that we stand for on the UN level. Not it wasn't direct like UN recognition, but it was still a great opportunity to present Liberland at the UN headquarters under this umbrella of these humanitarian organizations. And we're looking forward to have a more active role. Again, I'm looking forward just to have observatory membership for Liberland. At some point, we're already having some presence through intergovernmental organizations that are very close to Liberland. But for us right now, the most important thing is the relationship with the sovereign nation states, especially the ones around Liberland, where we're trying to make sure that we have a good, very good relationship with our neighbors. That's our top priority.
Wow. It sounds like you're trying to be a good neighbor in Europe and you're trying to build coalitions and alliances, which is definitely a good aim. So when I first got elected in November of 2022, the office I am allowed to serve in for District 39, which is Evabi, Waipahu, Kunia, Waikele, on the island of Oahu in the state of Hawaii, the office, so there's the office of District 39, and then there's the actual cubicle in our state capital. And Sharon Har was the previous occupant of the cubicle, the building wise, and on her front door she had a flag of the Ukraine country. And being a new representative of Hawaii, I didn't necessarily have a lot of empathy for outside countries as to more focus on my own district. So I took down the flag, and now it's just my name, Elijah Perrick, District 39, on a wooden door at the state capitol. So my focus is definitely at District 39, Ewa Beach, Waipahu, the state of Hawaii. For you as the president of Liberland, what would you say you're passionate about in being the leader of this country?
I'm really passionate about getting things right. I'm trying to think about a couple of years ahead and making sure that whatever we do now has good implications for the future. And I'm also extremely excited about the fact that when I'm looking ahead of Liberland, I see this exponential growth, which will be enormous, because we know that prosperity basically is derived from two things: the level of economic freedom and the level of security, or level of security of private property, right? These two things are key, and we know very well that we are aiming at the best possible quality of these two elements in Liberland, which should in return bring enormous prosperity. So I'm just trying to look forward and trying to make sure that these two things are at this level, which I'm promising in the future, and that everything basically just follows this plan.
Great. It sounds like you've got a plan. I remember when we met on Wednesday, I asked you, how did you become president? And there was a very unique story there. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I remember at the very beginning, it wasn't too many people in Liberland. It was just four of us back in the days. And most of the media reported to me that I'm self-declared president, but it's not true. There was a regular election. The three people voted for me, and I abstained. And it was crazy. In the next week, 250,000 people applied for citizenship. So we didn't have a big participation in election itself. But I think my presence as a head of the state of Liberland was very well confirmed by the fact that 250,000 people wanted to move to Liberland next week alone. And I think we had much bigger immigration than the whole United States in that particular week, right? Can you imagine that 250,000 would apply in 1 week for the green card or visa in the United States, right? In a way that they applied for the Liberland citizenship. So it was crazy. We went from from zero to huge interest that we were not able to manage. My office was full of people trying to read emails, because we also received like 700,000 emails with different kinds of support. We're just trying to utilize the best opportunities to move Liberland forward, but there was no way we could ever stay in touch with these people. Even if right now, if I started to shake hands with them, the line would be so long that I probably would never finish it till the end of my life. So, but there was a great confirmation that what we are doing makes sense. The interest was at least 100 times bigger than I was expecting when we were starting the country. So that was a great confirmation that what we do is something that is required, deeply important. But I also knew that we knew that we are not going to build the country over the first summer holiday. A lot of people were, feeling like we couldn't really properly start a country on the first 2 months, that everything is gone. But I knew this is a long run project. This is going to be at least half marathon. And yes, we managed to settle Liberland. We're building in Liberland now after 8 years. After 8 years of blockade, we are actually in this situation when Liberland has been actively developed. So we have moved to a completely new phase of development.
Wow, a completely new face of what's that?
Of development of Liberland, in a sense that 8 years we were just discussing how institutions should be formed, but we had a challenge with accessing Liberland, and now since August 6, the borders have been opened with Liberland, and the new challenge arises how to most efficiently develop Liberland as a country physically. But I think we have done a good job on the establishment of the institutions. Everything has been prepared, including the cadastre, including Congress. Everything has been working already in a way, or at least in the test phase, on the blockchain itself. So we've got things quite far. We just need a little bit more time to finalize the institutions, and we're also basically getting ready to take on this next wave of physical development of Liberland, which I think will be exciting, especially from the spring next year.
Amazing. So you definitely have some great plans for even more development. For those of us who are just now tuning on the radio, you're listening to Hawaii State Representative Elijah Perrick interviewing President Vit of Liberland, a new country in Europe. Please stay tuned till the top of the hour to hear the rest of this interview. So President Vit, to share a little bit about my story, I grew up in Hawaii and never thought about running for office until probably in my 50s or 40s, because I thought, that's when you have enough background to be a public servant. And then at 27 years old, I felt like the Lord leading me to step into it now, having never voted in Hawaii. And so I thought, well, if the Lord is leading, I shall go there. And so I ran for office. By God's grace, I won. What led you to become the president of Liberland? I know you said you were one of 4 citizens of the new country. Was there like a jockeying system? Was there pulling of the straws? How did that work?
No, of course it was. Actually, there was one friend of mine, Jiří, that was a great supporter, or like a partner initially, for all the things, including the flag and the website, etc. But from some point, it was basically my personal initiative that I was pulling through. And I was able to get a couple friends to go with me, including one journalist. And I took on the whole national movement, which has been rolling like a snowball since. But for me, why? I think the best reason for it is the book by Frederick Bastiat, The Law. It's an amazing piece of literature, only 50 pages, but I think it should be read by every high school student in the world, because it explains perfectly what is wrong with the states with today. That basically they have turned away from protecting people and their personal property into robbing people, and that is the cornerstone of all the problems that we're dealing in the society.
Yeah, definitely stealing and robbing. That's definitely a problem. You mentioned back on Wednesday at the American Legislative Exchange Council, when we first met, that you've had 5 times another country come over and do something that wasn't very polite. Do you mind sharing more about that?
We've got visitors from Croatia. It's funny because they don't have Liberland on any of their maps, so technically they're literally stepping outside of their own territory, and they're teasing us a little bit. But I think it's a standard part of building a country in Balkans. If you look into how other countries were created, it was always happening during some sort of crazy situation. We're very lucky that not a single injury has happened since the creation of Liberland, and despite all these very, I would say, interesting events like the one that Croatia conducted on 21st of September. But we're very lucky that even though the situation can sometimes be tense, that not a single person got injured in any shape or form. I don't think anybody who is working on starting a new country can say that after 8 years and thousands of people coming through. We've got a funny situation. People leave Liberland and then they get injured on a bike or in a car accident, but nobody in Liberland so far. So let me just knock on the wood here. And yes, we have a funny situation with Croatia right now. They came to collect the garbage. So now we are working in concert with them to collect the garbage from the whole forest, and we're quite excited that we've got this partnership with them. Sometimes they also collect other things than garbage, unfortunately. So we are in a dire need to sort the situation out, hopefully over the next couple of weeks.
Wow. Okay. So you have some relationships with your neighbors, and some are good, some are interesting. I want to get to know you, President Vit, more. So I grew up in Eva Beach. It's part of Oahu, part of the state of Hawaii. And I got my bachelor's, 2 masters, and a doctorate degree. I've done lots of ministry jobs. And now I serve in the state of Hawaii for my people. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what's your age, your education background, things like that.
Just turned 40. That was a great event. We were celebrating my birthday both in Liberland as well as in Croatia and Serbia, and there was a decent party in each country. And I studied monetary politics and diplomacy for my bachelor's. So it was a good combination, and I just actually ran over my bachelor's monetary thesis, which I find inspirational while we're now launching our own monetary system. And then I studied politology or political science right after that at several universities. And at the same time, I was always entrepreneurial. So we started one of the biggest internet networks. I was running an educational portal for freedom. I was a little bit into politics for some time, also starting one of the, I would say, only libertarian parties in Europe, one of the few. So I was trying to, and that's where my interest in building a country also arose, when I understood that changing something from within the political system is extremely difficult, especially if you have to convince the people. And the systems are sometimes not working because the people don't want them to work, right? So from that perspective, it is easier to start something from scratch than to fight from within. But kudos to you for fighting the fight. But at some point, I just decided it might be much more efficient to really start something from green, start something fresh, and then show to the world how to be a good example in running a country as the best and most efficient way to inflict a positive change.
Great. It sounds like you definitely have a passion for politics and the education you've pursued, and you're getting an opportunity to live it out and work it out as the president of Liberland. Let's kind of shift the conversation more to Hawaii and invite you to comment on the situations we have here. So you're the president of a new country of about 250,000 constituents. Is that right?
We've got 730,000 that applied for citizenship globally, out of which we have 7,000 e-residents and 1,000 citizens. We can safely, the territory can probably host 70,000 people. So we already have 1/10 of those people that are citizens or e-residents. We can still host much more in the future. So yes, please go ahead and tease me. But I'm going to be diplomatic. I usually don't comment on the political situation in other countries.
Okay. Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So Hawaii, some of our major issues include housing, homelessness, mental health, cost of living, things like this. So let's first start with education. In Hawaii, we've got one Department of Education that services the 4 counties, Kauai, Honolulu, Maui, and Big Island, Hawaii. And it's a very, I would say, top-heavy system. Every other United States in America has multiple school boards or multiple Department of Educations in their state. How does Liberland work?
By our constitution, we are forbidden to organize education, and we have a bunch of schools already. For example, the primary school of Liberland has a great curriculum that was prepared by Ron Paul, one of the most famous American libertarian politicians. But the state itself is forbidden to organize education, which I think is a very important part of what we're doing, to basically separate the state. Just like there was a separation of church and state at some point, now there is a time to separate the economy and the state, and also education and the state.
That's interesting. That's very unique. I think the founding of America, we've had schools being established as early as, for sure, the 1800s, I believe the 1700s. The U.S. Department of Education for America was started in the 20th century, so the 1900s. But of course, we've had state schools for hundreds of years. So for Liberland, a country in Europe, what do you believe the fear is or the reasoning behind not having a government-sponsored school?
Well, because the government shouldn't run these things that can be private, because they always tend to run less efficiently. It's a more waste of money. And yes, usually they're used for the state propaganda that doesn't have to really be in line with what is the best interest for the citizens. So, I'm a big fan of private schools. I'm a big fan of deregulating. So anybody who wants to start a school in Liberland is free to do so. If you want to just homeschool your kids, you're free to do so. If you want to homeschool your kids and 3 other kids, you're free to do so. I think that will lead to much more efficient way of education rather than putting everybody in these prison-like organizations with this preset set of rules, and where the people have to sit for 8 hours before they going home.
Wow. Well, thank you, President Vit, for giving us your perspective on a state or federally sponsored school system. I was homeschooled my entire life, and in 2022, my opponent in running for office for District 39 was the president of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. So we were basically the opposite ends of the spectrum when it came to philosophies of education. He supports state-sponsored school. I support school choice, which includes the state school. But one of the bills I introduced this year in the legislature was to give parents the freedom to say, we would like the tax dollars that go to our child, let's say it's $7,000 for each child. So the state budget is about $22 billion in Hawaii. 7,000 maybe-ish goes to each child. So if the child goes to Waipahu High School or Campbell High School, those tax dollars follows the child. Well, the school choice bill would allow for the parent to say, I want my child to go to homeschool. And so they get to pull that $7,000 of state income taxes that was going to go to that school to now go to the parent to lead their child the way they would prefer in homeschooling. Or if they want to go to a private school, anywhere in the state, they could let those tax dollars go to that school. Or let's say they live in Waipahu, but they wanted their child to go to Hawaii Kai and go to the Kaiser High School. They could choose that too. So that's school choice. But it sounds like for Liberland, it's not even that way. It's just, you just do whatever you want. Or can you fill in a little bit more on that?
It isn't the best, why should the state distribute some funding to people for schools? If you let the people freely decide what they want to do with their money, don't push them, they end up probably having the best ways to spend their money. That I have this quote actually, which has been attributed to me and now even used in some universities, that the socialism is a false belief that the state can spend your money better than you would. I'm not sure if I'm not 100% if it's 100% my original quote, but I haven't not seen it anywhere else. But I think it goes exactly to this point, right? That basically, the belief that somebody from the State Department would know better than yourself how you are supposed to spend your money is just a false belief.
I agree with you. I am with you, President Vit. Even though I have a doctorate degree and I've attained a 4.0 GPA in my bachelor's and 2 masters, and I went throughout all of high school fairly well, and I got all of my college paid for, I don't believe that I am better educated than my constituents to make their decisions when it comes to education. That's why I introduced school choice, to say you guys decide how you want to raise your kids educationally. So let's
amazing. Good job.
Thank you, President Vit. Let's shift the conversation to transportation. In Hawaii, we've got potholes galore. If you drive on the road longer than 3 miles anywhere in the state, you're probably going to encounter a road imperfection, usually in the form of a pothole, or sometimes trees that are overhanging in the area. Now, that might be different per district, but that's definitely a reality in much of our county. What does Liberland do with regards to roads? Do you guys tax the people, and then do those funds go towards rebuilding the roads?
And I think that infrastructure eventually will be a very small portion of the state budget, and this might be partially done in private way. Just like, when you look, for example, in Prague, there are whole districts that have been built by private initiatives, and even the roads and the parks inside of them has been developed by private entities. Look in France, which is a socialist country, and still majority of the highways are actually private enterprises that collect money, right? That's kind of funny that people always ask who will build the roads, and I'm telling them, look into the socialist France. The highways are actually private there. So from that perspective, I'm not worried. I know that Liberlanders will self-organize in the best possible way. Right now, we have just a bunch of dirt roads that are running through our country, but they're in good shape. You can drive 80 kilometers per hour, or like 50 miles without too much risk. And still they're quite flat and well maintained. But I think we will of course be forced to pave them very soon, and that should not be a big problem, because I would say the number of interest from investors and also from voluntary taxpayers is going to go through the roof very soon, and then paying for a couple highways shouldn't be a big deal.
Interesting. Okay, so I believe your Minister of Finance is with you there in Washington, D.C., and
Yes.
You mentioned that there might be voluntary taxes. So is taxes a universal mandate across everybody? Is there a percentile system? How does that work?
Well, this is one of the, I think, most exciting things about Liberland, where we're removing this obligation of citizens to pay taxes. They're welcome to do so. They can pay it even towards the subject that they like. And then they can, then they are getting the shares of the country in which they are living back. So the state releases certain amount of merits each year, which is actually less and less and less every year, and awards it to the taxpayers that are giving the state the money. So we're creating this shareholding entity which never runs out of shares, because we only release 10% of what is left every year. So that way we always have 90% after each distribution left. And I think it's pretty exciting, because then the citizens are true shareholders of their country. Their relation to the country in which they're living in is completely different from other countries, where they kind of say that in the democracy you're a shareholder, but in reality, really you are not. And it doesn't matter how harmful you are to the society, or how many millions of dollars of taxes you pay, you still have one person, one vote. And I don't think it's a good way to run society. It always leads to majority basically stealing money from minority over the time. But we do have also fully democratic element taken from Switzerland. So majority of citizens, one person, one vote, can decide to get rid of any new law that has been established by this corporate governance by our Congress. So we really have the best out of republic, a strong republican system, limiting the government to take care only of security, justice, and diplomacy, in combination with Swiss democracy. Basically, whatever the state comes up with, it can be always taken apart or destroyed by majority vote, and with combination of corporate governance, where our Congress is literally the board of a corporation which is running Liberland. So best elements of each governance system put together on single blockchain platform that run automatically and transparently.
Wow, that's fascinating. My friend Samuel, he lives in Melani. He would love everything you're talking about when it comes to decentralized cryptocurrency. If he was on the show, he would have lots of questions. He just eat it up. That's a very unique way to run the country, and I thank you for being transparent as to how it's working. I remember taking high school civics and learning about our constitutional republic in America, where we take principles from democracy, principles from the Roman Republic and England's Republic, and combining them, fusing them together in the late 1700s to make America. So definitely many ways to do it. What would you say Liberland, the new country in Europe's view is on healthcare? So in Hawaii, mental health is definitely in a crisis. We need more mental health counselors. We need more people that can provide care and support for people who are basically downtrodden with diagnoses that are problematic. So a lot of people take drugs in Hawaii. A lot of people, the common person would just say they're crazy. You drive on the road in Ala Moana and you see somebody cussing and taking off their clothes and you're thinking to yourself, wow, they need help. So is there anything like that going on in Liberland?
Well, not really. I'm quite happy that we don't have too many crazy people in Liberland so far. But of course, we might have that issue. From my own personal perspective, I think the biggest problem is with overuse of pharmaceutical drugs for treatment of mental diseases. That's one of my biggest concerns when it comes to, for example, Czech Republic. The number of kids that came to my mother's school for students that have learning disabilities, maybe 40% of them were on Ritalin. So you can see basically that kids are put on speed. Literally, it is the same substance which is banned. They are put on speed by their own governments, and then they are wondering why there is such a higher rate of whatever criminality or people actually going crazy. Yes, if you put people on illegal substance, you call it Ritalin, not speed, and then you complain that your kids are actually behaving strangely, you have a little bit of a problem. So I think one of the biggest issues really is overuse of pharmaceutical drugs when it comes to treatment of whatever, ADHD, whatever it is. I don't believe it's actually an illness. I think has been basically created falsely by the pharmaceutical industry to make a lot of money. So from that perspective, I think this is number one problem, and everything else can be solved by private practitioners of Liberland, in Liberland. We are not going to license somebody to be doctor. I believe the free market will make sure that the good doctors get good rating on Google Maps, and bad doctors get bad rating, whatever up it will be, and people will be able to easily choose which doctor they want to go to.
President Vit, I'm very encouraged by the way you're describing your form of governance and just openness to the free market. As a conservative in Hawaii, I definitely brand myself as that and believing that the private sector is the superior model to the solutions in our state. At the same time, people can go to the Hawaii Public Access Room and ask for Representative Perrick's voting record, and I have voted for regulations in Hawaii. So what you're describing is much more free than it sounds like what I've been espousing, and it challenges me to believe in it more. So if we were to take us back to, I think it was March or April of this year, in the Hawaii House of Representatives, there was a bill introduced to give more funding to the State Department of Health to answer the suicide crisis in Hawaii. So there's lots of theories on how suicide comes about, and there's lots of perspectives on how we should solve the problem of suicide. I voted no on the bill because of what you're saying. I believe the private sector can solve the problem, bring the solution. So I stood up on the chamber floor, held the microphone in my mouth, and said, I'm voting no because this is the tax dollars being allocated to the State Department of Health to solve an issue that the private sector can solve. And then my colleague from the Big Island, who's a member of the majority party, she said, if that's the case, then why hasn't the private sector already solved the issue? And then my counter would be as well, if the state is the solution, which we already have a Department of Health, why haven't they solved the issue? So there's definitely a tension between should this government take over, should the private sector take over in solving the issue? For you guys, is there one health issue that comes up over and over again?
Well, luckily most of Liberlanders are healthy, which I'm quite excited about. Yeah, we had some minor things happening over the last couple of weeks since we settled Liberland, but it's all easily solved with either some local help. What we really need to do is have more medics come down and live permanently in Liberland, so we don't have to rely on our neighbor Croatia to provide us with medical services. So that's one of my biggest concern. We want to have ambulance permanently present, not just some medics with the limited equipment. That's one of the main tasks for next month.
Interesting. Okay. So we talked about regulation a moment ago. We talked about the health department. We talked about freedom versus regulation. Many of those in America who promote regulation believe that it's protecting the consumer. Therefore, we have like the Department of Consumer Protection Agency. In America, you can sell trans fats in a Big Mac, and basically when it goes into your body, in your blood, it turns to plastic. And a lot of people don't know that, but basically McDonald's is selling plastic in their burgers. And the U.S. Department of Health, the organizations that grant access for people to sell food to the public as branded as food, I think they let some things slip through the cracks. Hydrogenated soybean oils are also, I think, unhealthy, yet it's sold as food, but when it goes in the body, it solidifies like plastic. So we have problems in America when it comes to regulating for protection. We have loopholes, if you will. Things get through the cracks. With Liberland, a country in Europe, do the consumers, the citizens, ever get concerned about, basically private companies preying on them and abusing them, exploiting them by getting their money and selling something that's not good for them?
Well, I don't think so. Right now, we don't have that problem. And my experience, for example, now with aspartame, right? Also, funny story. The WHO now, after I don't know how many years after saying this is the only safe sweetener, decides it's actually carcinogenic, right? So you have these like fatal mistakes done by either these supranational institutions or national institutions that are supposed to protect our health, but they actually really provide us only with false feeling of protection. And there's another great example is amalgam in teeth, a terrible disaster, basically poisoning millions of people globally by claiming that amalgam, which has mercury inside it, is safe to fix the teeth. I was also victim to that. It cost me $2,000 to get all the mercury out of my teeth. But in Czech Republic, it is still state-sponsored way how to fix teeth, and actually, it's the only one that fits into the very small budget of the national healthcare system. So the state basically poisons you for your own taxpayers' money. While some other Scandinavian countries have banned the use of amalgam and mercury, 10 years, 20 years ago, Czech Republic actually goes ahead and puts you the mercury directly in your mouth and tells you this is a free service from your state. So again, I believe the one other thing is that Liberland is going to have only private system of medical services, which I believe will be much superior to anything that the state would try to organize, and I think we will actually end up being a nice medical hub, probably for next year already. And now we have a huge already longevity conference being organized. It will be half in Liberland and half in Budapest. So I'm quite excited that there is these tech entrepreneurs that are into whatever cryogenics and DNA repair and all these longevity techniques, and that these entrepreneurs from Liberland are getting together for November for this major event that will show that Liberland is also actually on the forefront already of this research in longevity.
Excellent. It sounds like you guys are letting the private sector guide your health for your country, and that's the superior way over the state telling people how they should be healthy. That's great. So when we recorded this session with you and me, today is October 6th, this afternoon in Hawaii, about 6 p.m., at the state-funded, so our state income taxes, Hawaii residents, go towards the State Art Museum, and that art museum is hosting a drag queen story hour. Basically, men dressed as women, giving tours of the art museum, things like that. You mentioned earlier that people in Liberland can choose where their taxes go. If I had that opportunity in Hawaii, I would choose not to have my taxes go to the State Art Museum. They archive and curate objects that I don't think are best utilized with tax dollars. How does that work in Liberland? If I'm a citizen there, once a year, do I have to pay my taxes, and then do I just fill out a box of where my taxes are going?
Well, not really. Right now, you go online, and when you can pay taxes anytime in Liberland, and right now the new website that is going to be up and running very soon will have this option where you can choose which budget it goes through. But right now there is no option to put money for the cultural activities. We really believe this should be organized also by private sector. If there is a music happening or whatever, some sort of theater happening in Liberland, it usually is being paid by myself rather than from state budget, as it was, for example, the case with the band that came for my birthday. And now we're going to have a series of cultural events. I'm also trying to fundraise for it separately, if not utilizing the state budget for these events. Well, the state might be providing part of the infrastructure, which is still very critical. Like getting to Liberland is still a challenge, but we already have a private boats coming down to Liberland to provide transportation. Next week we have a first bigger boat that comes down to provide trips up and down the Danube. So it's pretty exciting that the state can actually step down also from these transportation projects and really focus on what we believe is most important, that is security, justice, and diplomacy. Those are the key elements in line with what founding fathers of United States wanted the United States to be like.
Amazing. That's wonderful. For us who are just now joining the radio show and listening, I'm your host, Representative Elijah Perrick, interviewing the president of Liberland, President Vit. And we've been talking about conservatism, we've been talking about free market, we've been talking about the alternative of socialism, which is the state collecting your resources and then redistributing them as they believe best fits the state. Let's shift the conversation and talk about parents and children. How does that work as a culture in Liberland? Do you guys have a regular nuclear family system of one mom, one dad, one child? Or is there alternative lifestyles in Liberland? What's the culture there like?
Thank you for the question. Well, there is, of course, there is no regulation about the marriage. And I think it's very important because we don't have this crazy gay marriage debate in Liberland. Like people can literally choose whatever agency they want to get married, and then they can follow up with it. Now we have one agency that also provides the marriage certificates, not just in Liberland, but also in Utah. So you get a properly internationally recognized marriage, which is done over Zoom, which is pretty exciting. So it is one of the most efficient ways how to get married. And you're not just like married in Liberland, and you're not getting any certificate from state, but we can help you getting a certificate from Utah, which is internationally recognized. And well, the question about the families, I think it really is up to private individuals how they want to organize their private lives. And funnily enough, one of the churches that is now pushing to be more present in Liberland are the Mormons, which are bringing an alternative lifestyle in that regard as well. I don't mind. It's kind of fun to have multiple ways of organizing family also within Liberland.
Interesting. Wow. Sounds like there's a lot of freedom. When I first shared with my dad last night that I was going to have a Zoom call with you, or a video conference call, I mentioned that he's the president, Mr. Vit, is the president of Liberland. And my dad said, Liberland, is that a new country in Oregon? So he thought the word liberal was tied to the liberals of West Coast America. So can you define for us what is liberalism and how does it relate to Liberland? And what is conservatism and how does that relate to Liberland?
Well, I think the main term is classical liberal, right? That's where all these big names and big fingers are coming from. Or libertarian, that's kind of overlapping there. And those are really people that believe in freedom. Interestingly enough, the liberalism or a liberal word has been hijacked by people that believe in less freedom in the United States for some reason, or they've got maybe some of the social issues that they believe are more important than economic issues, and they want some freedom in that aspect. But otherwise, I would say basically that it is really a spectrum from more freedom to less freedom that is the most important. Everything else is just confusion, right? Left spectrum is very confused. People don't understand what it stands for. And basically any other ways of looking on the political map or political landscape rather than more or less freedom, I think are in a way confused, and we cannot really use them for any reasonable debate. So Yeah, just tell me, do you want more freedom in economy, in your personal life, or do you want less? And I can tell you where you're standing.
That's a great point. If folks in Hawaii were to join my social media and follow me on either Instagram, TikTok, X, and see the conversations that go on in the chamber floor in Hawaii, the liberals, the Democrats, they're often doing things that are restricting freedom, restricting your First Amendment right, restricting your freedom of assembly, so many things like that. But their name, liberal, means like gracious or generous or open or freedom. And so I love how you defined the term in its root. Would you say that conservatism or liberalism is more reflective of Liberland, the country in Europe?
Well, let me just go back to actually Ferenc Bastiat, because he was sitting on the left side of the political spectrum with socialists, interestingly enough, because they were kind of against the power of the king, right? That's where this kind of confusion or kind of switching of sides also happened. So, I mean, we really don't, as a freedom-loving people, we don't really care where the oppression is coming from. We really want more freedom for ourselves and for our families. And from that point of view, if Ferenc Bastiat was actually on the left side of the political spectrum as well. And what I find very interesting, that many liberals, as you name them, including a lot of people from the Labour Party, also find Liberland fascinating for our interest in freedom, also from the personal, from the perspective of personal freedoms rather than from the perspective of economic freedoms. So we do find supporters on both sides of left and right political spectrum. And there is this deeper history that also puts classical liberalism actually to the left side of political spectrum. So we're really trying to find similarities and agreement rather than division in this respect. And I'm very grateful for all the people that that basically want more socialism, for example, in their countries, but they support Liberland because they think it's a great social experiment of building more freedom in a territory of 7 square kilometers somewhere in Balkans, where nobody knew that there is a piece of land which nobody claimed for 30 years.
Yeah, wow. I love your graciousness in being able to hold your preference while at the same time valuing your neighbors' perspectives. So like Liberland promotes liberalism, free market, and then you have neighbors that promote socialism and you honor their preference. What would you say drives more diplomacy and cooperation amongst you and your neighboring countries? Is it mostly the personality of each leader, or is it a shared culture? How does that work?
Well, I was very grateful to be able to meet the president of Croatia 2-3 months ago. It was great, and I have a great sympathy for his activities. I think he's one of the most honest heads of states in the world right now. So we're very lucky that he is in power in Croatia and that he is being able to speak his mind freely right now. He's not very popular with the government of Croatia, and I think that also is part of our political or diplomatic problem right now. Because we were seen with the president, and he is not in good condition with the prime minister. So yes, we're trying our best to make friends on both sides of Danube, and make sure that we find some dialogue. And we're very grateful for the fact that the president of Croatia is open-minded, and he shook hands with me during this event in June this year.
Wonderful. Well, great job being diplomatic. We've got about 1 minute and 45 seconds left in the show. I want to encourage people that they can, if you're listening on to this radio program now, you can listen to the whole interview by going to Rep. Elijah Perrick. That's a YouTube channel, and you can watch the whole interview unedited. Also, we air every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. in Hawaii on 94.3 AM, FM, 690 FM. 6:90 a.m. The Answer. With about a minute left, President Vit of Liberland, a country in Europe, what would you like to share to the people of Hawaii?
Well, first of all, I'm coming soon, so I'm very excited to first time in my life with Hawaii, and I would be very excited if people from Hawaii came to visit us. If they're ever in Europe, I'm willing to personally treat them and show them around Liberland whenever they make it down here. And it would be great pleasure to have more people from Hawaii actively involved in the country building. And it takes 2 minutes to sign up for e-residency and a little bit longer to become citizen, but it's very easy project, very easy process to join the project at liberland.org.
Wonderful. Liberland.org. I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully someday going to Europe and then someday going to your country. It'd be an honor to see how it works there. I know that we have multiple state conventions called the Council of State Legislators, American Legislative Exchange Council, and they invite leaders like yourself to these conferences to share with state legislators how they're running their countries and how we can potentially legislate in our states based on other countries' successful models. So thank you so much for joining us.